All right. So welcome to the ranch, Congressman.
Great to be here
Yes.
finally.
Let me
Hey,
shake your hand.
thank you
All right. Thank you
for
so much.
having me. I know we've been talking about it for a little while, and
Yes, we have. And we finally brought it together for you to be here. So welcome to the ranch.
thanks.
I really appreciate you coming and joining us.
Thank you.
So
Great.
how you doing today? How busy have you been today?
Well, it's been a busy day. We started off. We had a press conference early today in Harlingen, Texas, because we just got declared a a major disaster, as
Oh,
you
yeah, that's
saw.
right.
The
Yeah.
president signed that on Friday. We'd been pressuring on that for 2 months now. In homes that were impacted by the recent flood. We have 2,000 that were really bad. That are still many of them that are still underwater.
Yes. So how does the regular audience go and look for this help?
Yep.
Where can we suggest them to look it
So
up?
we're telling them there's 4 ways to do it. You can go online to the FEMA online and make your claim there, or you can get an app on your phone and do it through the app.
Okay.
Or thirdly, you can make a phone call. You can actually do it on the phone. Or number four, which is great if you're here locally and nearby,
Okay.
is go and meet with them. They're going to be here physically until August of this year.
Okay.
And you want to make sure you take your ID. You want to make sure you have your social security number, photographs, receipts of things you paid for, bills that you anticipate to pay for, like fixing your home, fixing your car, a damaged computer, anything that was damaged that you haven't been able to afford to buy yet because you're out of money,
Yes.
but you need because it was damaged by the storm. Anything that's directly attributed to the damage of the storm. I'm glad we're talking about this.
Yes.
You can go to the FEMA office and you can process your claim. And the good thing about seeing them in person is they're going to see everything you have and tell you yes, everything is there or something is missing. You also want to have, if you can, your bank account number, because once you're approved, they can wire that money right into your bank account.
Right.
So a lot of times people can't successfully recover the money because they don't have the paperwork in order. Number one, you got to have an ID and a social security number.
Of course.
Right? Start with there. And then everything after that is photographs, documentation, receipts of money, things you paid. It could be a repair estimate that you haven't done yet, but you have photos that
Right.
it's been damaged or damage to a vehicle, or you have a bookcase that was, rained in on or flooded in.
Yeah.
Whatever you can prove. It could be medical bills that were attributed to it during that period.
Okay.
I know we had we lost a couple of lives in Hidalgo County for loss of life.
Unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately, it'll pay for funeral expenses. If there was a gap in work, it'll pay for that. If you had to move out to a hotel or you have a furnished apartment right now because of the storm that you're living in,
Mm-hmm.
those are all the types of bills that you can present on a FEMA claim.
And Congressman, does it matter? Is there like you can't make so much money and still request to get this assistance? Is there a certain guidelines?
So
we
if
should
you
follow?
have insurance and your insurance is paying you for that, it's not necessarily on that, but if your insurance says, well, we're going to pay for your roof or we're going to pay for this, but we're going to pay for your roof, but we're not paying for the water on the bottom, then we can't help you.
Mhm.
Or we can't, or, you have your computer equipment that's not covered under your policy.
Yes.
That's what we call gaps in coverage. And that's the areas that we want to take to FEMA to see if they can cover it.
Yes.
And then for small businesses, there's also some help for small businesses that were impacted by the storm. And there's resources sometimes that you can borrow money at low interest, or sometimes at no interest. And sometimes there's grant opportunities. So I tell folks, go talk to the experts at the SBA. Tell them, if your business was impacted by these recent storms and you had to close the doors and you still haven't opened, or you had a gap of business, you were closed for 30 days and you've lost income and you've had to lay people off and you've gone through a struggle, present that claim to the Small Business Administration and see if there's something that they may be able to do to help.
Yes. Well, thank you for helping us with all that.
Absolutely.
Yes, because all of us here, we need that help.
Yeah. Thanks.
Some are luckier than others, depending where you live. And what I mean by that is that some zones are more prone to flooding than others.
That's right. Like I could tell you, we got hit really hard in the northern part of Cameron County, out to Arroyo City, Harlingen, San Benito, Combs. The northern part of it got hit really hard, and then if you go into East Hidalgo, there's different pockets, as you said.
Yes.
Some in Mercedes, some in Westlaco, some in Donna. But Alamo got hit really, really hard. There was
Yes.
an
San
area,
Juan,
San Juan, very
yes,
heavily.
all that along the expressway.
That's exactly right. That's why I thought it was important to have, obviously in Harlingen an office, but I think in Weslaco and my office. Oh, I also have an office in Weslaco at the city hall.
Okay.
So if we can help y'all, let us know, and we're here to help.
Well, thank you for that. So one of the podcasts I already had, we had the mayor of Couch, the mayor of Weslaco. We even had the local weatherman, Tim Smith, and we were talking about that. I don't know if you've seen our
No, I haven't. I haven't.
podcast. So that was one of the things, the biggest impact. So I wanted to bring attention to that. What can we do for ourselves? Like keeping our yards clean and all that. So when the drainage can,
Drainage is really, really, really important.
yes,
And especially small towns like Ed Couch that doesn't have the resources sometimes to keep their drainage clean.
Mhm.
I mean, we tell homeowners, try to do your part, try to do your little
Yes.
section, keep your area clean, and try to get everybody to be responsible. But I go to my little towns that don't have dredgers and don't have all the personnel, and they're limited in resources, and try to say, let's go to the county and see if they can help us.
yes,
And send out a crew, or send out a piece of equipment that can maybe do the job for you very efficiently. And at the end of the day, it makes our communities nicer, but it makes people healthier, safer, and it causes less damage, because when we have one of these storms,
yes.
it's devastating in certain areas of the region.
Yeah, it's a very big deal here, Congressman. Very big deal.
It really is.
Everybody starts getting scared every time it rains now.
Yeah.
Everybody's thinking, okay, is my house going to flood again? And that was one of the topics that we were discussing is what's the long-term solution for us? What do we have to do? And
Yeah.
so that's why one of the reasons I'm very happy that you're here, because I thank you again. You brought the attention in DC proposing, right? And I would like for you, if you could expand to us on your project or how you're participating to get funding so we can find that solution.
Right.
My business sense, experience is if we continue not to resolve the problem year after year, how much is that costing? Billions or millions, whatever it is, right? Add it up. And then do a feasibility study and find out, okay, how much would it cost to fix the problem? Like in California, you have those humongous, in Los Angeles, those canal cement canals, right?
Mhm.
And so many other solutions to present ideas and put a more or less a price on it. And then perhaps, you do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 until, does it take 5 years? Is it a 10-year program? Because we have the floodway here in the Rio Grande Valley that I believe Tim Smith actually notified us. I thought they had created it after Beulah. Can you imagine if we had another category 5 here?
So I just testified before the Transportation Infrastructure Committee on this issue particularly.
Yes.
And I brought millions of dollars to try to fix what we can, creating retention ponds and moving water north and south and east and west, and
Right.
and trying to do that type of stuff. But the real solution at the end of the day is the Raymondville drain that we've been working on since I think 1986.
Yes.
We were probably in high school, maybe even junior high at the time, right? And right, imagine since then, and all this came after the Army Corps of Engineers did a study after Hurricane Beulah, which was when I was born, I think 1967. The RGV was underwater all the way into McAllen.
Yes.
And to fix this, the Raymondville drain, which means it starts way up the Rio Grande Valley all the way to the coast and clear a massive,
Right.
think of it as a long ditch that runs down the Rio Grande Valley, and we all put our water into it and it flows out. Well, the price tag on it at the time was about $440 million. Right now, I'm thinking it's probably $700 or $750, which, may sound like a lot, but at the end of the day, it's really a drop in the bucket, because I've told, this is what I told the Transportation Infrastructure Committee last week, is if we don't make this investment, it's no different than in New Orleans when they had that levee that we could have fixed for, $100 million, right? And it ended up costing billions and billions of dollars in damage.
Exactly.
And it's no different here. If we don't get this done and we get a category 3 or 4 or a severe storm, or that 1,000-year rain in a very short amount of time that's more widespread, it will cost the federal government tens of billions of dollars for us to recover.
Do they understand that, Congressman?
I think they do. The thing is that they got to have the commitment. In this country, we're used to fixing things after they're broken, not before they are, and it's really unfortunate. But what I was telling them was two things now, that something that in 1986 we couldn't argue.
Good Shepherd PHC is growing, and we're hiring dedicated providers to join our team. We also welcome new patients across the Rio Grande Valley who want care that's personal and professional. Visit goodshepherdphc.com or call 95626-27445. Good Shepherd, taking care of you at home.
Today, if we're devastated like that, it impacts the American food table, because our food, the most produce in the United States comes in through one port of entry here in far Texas.
Is that right?
That brings most of the agriculture on the table, on the tables of the American people. And we're now working on getting LNG terminals out to the port of Brownsville. So it's creating a situation where it's in our national security's best interest for us to assure that we're never devastated like that again. And those are the points I'm trying to use when we're talking to appropriators and folks in the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, saying, if you don't fix it today, and now we're on the record, right? I'm telling you on the record, if we don't fix it and we're devastated with a category 3 or 4, it doesn't even have to be a 4. I think a category 3 would put us underwater, and I don't think we have the infrastructure to get the water out. If we can't do it, and the last rain, they called it the 1,000-year rain. It wasn't as widespread, but the areas that it hit heavily and within a very short amount of time. And even places with like okay infrastructure couldn't get the water out.
It's going to be devastating.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we keep working on it and we fix it and we at least improve it. And I've also, by the way, pitched the idea of doing it in phases, because they're like, well, $700 million we're going to need. So I said, well, let's do part of it. Let's do $250 million. Then we'll do the other 250, and then eventually we'll keep pushing. But sitting on our hands should be unacceptable. And it's not just here; it's in other places. And while you see us squandering billions of dollars on projects all over the country that make no sense, and all over the world that are not in the interests of the American people sometimes.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of those projects later, but this is really important to our area, the flooding, the flooding problem.
Right? That is a real
disease, employment,
and water.
Yes, exactly. The drought, that's another issue, right? The water problem. But I feel that we need to address it. So,
which we have solutions for the water problem too. We just got to make the infrastructure investments. We've got a lot of brackish water under us that can be cleaned. We have desalination projects that can be done. Obviously, we got to keep asking Mexico to pay us the water they owe us,
of course.
But even if Mexico paid us 100% of the water they owe us today, we would be about 30% short of what we were in 1985. Because of the population growth and industry growth that we've had in the valley. So looking into the future, what I'd like to say is, if we start today and we start investing in what they call it desalination of brackish water, even though it's not completely salt, but they desalinate brackish water, that would give us an abundance of water in itself. And if we're working on one in Brownsville, which that project puts Brownsville at 69% self-sustainability on cleansing their own brackish water. Then if we do which this would be a much more substantial investment, is a desalination of seawater. That's about a $1.3 to $1.6 billion project. And it sounds like a lot of money, but if you do the brackish water and the desal water, and we keep pressing Mexico to pay us our water on time, I can promise you that in 20 years, if we started today, in about 15 or 20 years, we would never again have a water problem.
Are you getting the support in DC to support these projects?
Yes, we are. So right now, there's federal money that we sent to the state that is being spent around the district. Some money's coming down to us for water. In Texas, this legislative cycle took water as a very important issue. It's a vital issue to our state's security. And that we can continue to prosper, because the drought is not just affecting us here in the valley; it's a statewide problem. And I think the governor and the lieutenant governor, and I think the politicians in Austin have realized that and are committed into making the investments. These are things that we can't play around with. And we can't be doing it in the last minute either. We got to start working on it today. We can't expect a storm to hit us every 2 or 3 years and get us out of trouble, because eventually we'll be in trouble.
So going back to the flooding issue, the things you had proposed in DC and the Capitol, how can we help you rattle the cage to get this funding to make sure see it through?
Yeah.
You proposed it, you brought the issue up, but what does that mean? Does that guarantee that it's going to get funded?
So the best way that you could help rattle the cage is pressuring our 2 state senators, right? Senator Cruz and Senator Cornyn, and appropriators, right? That, hey, these resources are important. I think if any member of Congress in the state that you can talk to is a good person to talk to. But we have 2 state senators, one senior, U.S. senators. We have 1 senior U.S. senator that can be very impactful and helpful in assuring that we get those resources. And we passed that bipartisan infrastructure funding during the Biden administration. That was $2.3 trillion in infrastructure funding, which most of it hasn't been spent, and not all of it has been appropriated to every project. And we need to be using it for projects like this. And at the end of the day, we talk about $1 billion being a lot of money, but it's really nothing compared to when you consider how much the expenditures that we've expended around the world.
Right. So it hasn't been appropriated yet. So what is that?
No, the infrastructure funding has passed, but it hasn't all been appropriated to little projects like the Raymondville drain, for example, that they say, okay, we're going to take, $400 million out of this pot of money and put it into this project.
Right.
And that's what we need, and that's what I'm pushing for, and that's what I'm fighting for, and that's what I'm talking to appropriators and
to see it through, to make sure
see it through. Say, okay,
right,
the money is now there because we passed it in our infrastructure funding, our bipartisan infrastructure bill. Now let's put it towards projects like this.
Yes.
And make sure that we see it through. And this is something that we've been talking about now for 35 years, almost 40 years.
Yeah, that's too long.
That's a long time.
We can't be waiting. We need to move on it. I see it every day, especially when it rains, right?
Yeah.
But going back to that, Congressman, should we be concerned about the funding because of everything that's happening right now in DC, where they're cutting funding for this or that? Do you think that is it on a chopping block? What's your
there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things on this chopping block. Obviously, the big beautiful bill that was just voted on last week, which I was clearly and proudly a no, at least on the one that we voted on that day, that's going to cut $500 billion of Medicare funding. That's going to have a direct impact on senior citizens here in our region, and it's going to have another $400 billion in Medicaid cuts. And regardless of how they argue it, at the end of the day, it's $900 billion, almost $1 trillion in funding cuts from American healthcare.
Okay, I would like to expand on that, Congressman, because right now we're going to hit a large audience. Some are Republicans, some are Democrats, somebody in the middle, and so forth. If I was a Democrat, you can explain it and justify yourself. If the crowd out there is a Republican,
Well, I can justify that one too.
yes, could you please expand on
Yes.
that? Because so we can clarify.
Yeah. So on top of this, and I'll tell you, there's some things that I do like about the Medicaid cuts, because they're putting in some work requirements, and they're making sure it's not people just gaming the system, getting free health care and food stamps, which I think most of us are against, right? But they're asking for a debt limit increase, which will, over the next 10 years, will put us into $3.7 trillion further into debt.
Okay.
And that's that came out of the Congressional Budget Office, which is a neutral office. That's not a Democratic or Republican controlled. It's a neutral body that's always been neutral and gives it to you the way it is, right?
Right.
And they calculated that we would be $3.8 trillion further into debt in 10 years, because even though we're cutting costs, we're extending those tax breaks for billionaire corporations that are not going to be that are going to be, and these aren't like the small mom and pop guys with a few $1 million. These are the major players in the country and in the world that will have a longer term budget cuts, and they're adding expenditures in other parts of the budget. So Medicare cuts, I'm obviously against because I think it hurts our senior citizens way too much, and we should be trying to find ways to give them more care. You being in the healthcare business, I think you are probably directly impacted by some of this.
Directly every day. I'm already seeing it.
Probably more than Medicaid, probably, right?
Yes. Oh yes, both Medicare more so, because right now it's kind of trickling down, and they're holding. I understand the accountability.
When time is running out, you deserve care that's real. Concord Hospice Care helps families across the Rio Grande Valley with honest support and expert help. Visit concordhospicecare.com or call 956-532-7983. Concord Hospice Care, it's our turn now.
But I service a large population of hospice care.
Yeah.
It's much needed.
But it's all Medicare.
And so what they're doing is called Targeted Probe and Educate, TPE. And we're all about the accountability. But what's happening is patients, you can't tell them you have 6 months or less to live. If they live a week, a day past 6 months, they want additional documentation. And I can talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
And we can, talk about it later. And we do need your help. But I'm going to give you the 3-second version. So we're having to justify why a patient lived longer than 6 months. Okay? And you can't do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
How are you going to tell this family? Right now, they're going through a tremendously hard time just adjusting. They're about to lose a loved one, right? They need the pain medication. They need to eat so many things, right? Chaplain services, etc., social services. And so they find technicalities. They request for additional documentation. We submit it. And they'll find a small technicality. For example, the nurse practitioner or physician forgot to check something off, a check mark. If it's a technicality, you can't appeal it. Regardless if the patient, let's say he passed away within 6 months, you cannot appeal it. The patient passed away. All the documentation demonstrate that the patient met criteria for hospice care and the patient passed away. So we have eaten the cost for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for a lot of patients because of a technicality. And that's something that I feel should be looked at.
Right.
Why can you
If it's a mistake, right?
It is a mistake. The nurse practitioners, physicians, they're seeing thousands of patients in a month. Of course, that they might forget, to check one off. A check mark, a technicality. Nope, can't appeal it. And I understand they're trying to cut back. They probably have a goal. I've worked for the federal government. They're being told, hey, you know what? This is our target. This is our goal. We want X amount of dollars by this month to be saved so we can demonstrate and justify our accountability. Okay. But you know what? We're human beings, right? We're going to make mistakes. So there's where the challenge and the issue that I have. I strongly believe in the program. Medicare, it's not like it's a freebie.
No. We've been paying for it, yes.
Exactly.
And we're all continuing to pay for it.
So I have to eat the cost. I don't even mention to the patients, right, that if I got paid or not. That's for another conversation. But however, they paid into the system, Congressman, for years of working hard.
Right.
It's not a freebie. Nobody's giving it to them. It's not their fault that the government wasted and spent that money.
Right. On other things.
On other things. Exactly. They shouldn't have. If that was a business, I'd be in jail.
Oh, yeah. No. If the United States government was a business, we'd be in serious trouble.
Yes.
Right. As a business.
Yeah. Accountability and all that. It's, but so we can have long conversations. But, I understand the points from Republicans. I understand, the need for, on the Democratic side is an entitlement.
That's why it only passed. There was a lot of Republican opposition to it. President Trump had to really, really get involved and get on the phones and pressure a lot of people that were no's into being yeses.
Mm-hmm.
And it only passed by one vote.
Yes.
Only passed by one vote. A lot of people who have Medicaid in their district, like down here in the Rio Grande Valley, it was really hard for people to vote yes on that bill.
Mm-hmm.
And Medicare recipients, right? A lot of senior citizens. 75 of the poorest districts in America are represented by Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, and places like Mississippi, West Virginia, Kentucky,
Southern states.
Yeah, southern states and poor states at the end of the day. Some of the poorest in Louisiana, and where you have a huge population that rely. Here in the valley, we have over 100,000 people on Medicaid. Over 26% of households in my congressional district, and even more in my adjoining district, have a recipient of Medicaid in their home. More than 1 out of 4. So it's very disruptive when you have that much of a population. Now, if you're in Connecticut, this is not that much of an issue, right? If you represent Santa Barbara, California, well, this is nothing, right? It's no big deal.
Right.
But when you represent populations like ours that have a lot of poverty, that have a lot of also a high senior population, because we have a lot of winter Texans that come down.
Exactly. You had a large influence.
Yes.
Influx in during the wintertime. That you get a lot of winter Texans.
And it puts a lot of pressure on our healthcare system, and we need to make sure that we have the Medicare funding to take care of those seniors when they're here.
And the veterans. The VA program
And
down here.
it
we have
also-
a lot of veterans.
It also, we have 55,000 veterans here. It also has a impact. This bill has some veteran funding cuts. Besides, and a lot of our veterans are dealing with Medicare and some of them are dealing with Medicaid and all the same issues that everyone is dealing with. But there's also direct cuts to VA funding. So we're in for a ride now. We'll see what happens in the Senate. We're hoping they can clean it up.
Yes.
People are calling us on some of the issues, and we tell them, hey, call our senators, call Senator Cruz, call Senator Cornyn. I have a good relationship with both of them, and I think that they should know about things that are impacting certain parts of the state.
So that greatly influences you when you vote, of course. You need to vote for us. You're our representative.
Let me tell you, I vote for my district before I vote blue or red, right?
Okay.
I vote for South Texas. I vote for the needs of people here. So I voted with Republicans on things that I thought made the most sense for my district, and I vote for Democrats when I think that makes the most sense for my district. But to me, it's unfortunate that votes have to be blue or red. They should just be A, right, for Americans.
Can
And
you expand how you feel about that when something comes up for a vote? How do you have a process of how you start? Okay, I'm gonna probably vote this way or that way.
yeah,
What's your protocol?
well, I've been at this for a while now, so I always think what helps South Texas. Trade helps South Texas. Sometimes I vote with my Republican friends on some of those bills that Democrats don't join us on. Oil and gas helps us. The border, I've been critical on the situation on the border with both President Biden and formerly in the last administration with President Trump. And I'm optimistic now, right? Regardless of how we feel of our president, there's some policies that I like on both sides of the aisle. And one thing that I'm optimistic about under this administration is that we can finally get the border cleaned up. And that we can assure that trade is not getting extorted when it's going north and south. And we got 2 gas terminals at the port of Brownsville that will be exporting liquefied natural gas to the world from right here. And we're going to be deepening and broadening that port. And it's going to be transformative for our region. So there's a lot of great things happening, along with all the stress and things that concern me and worry me. I'm also very optimistic that our population is growing better educated, healthier, and wealthier here in the Rio Grande Valley. We still have a lot of work to do, but trade continues to grow. Opportunities are growing in the region. We'll be exporting Texas natural gas to the world right here. We hopefully once we get the port expanded, we'll be receiving cruise ships. I anticipate that it won't be long before we're dismantling nuclear vessels here at our port. Decommissioned
A lot of good things coming.
a lot of great things. We have about 25 of those sitting in Virginia. Those are $1 billion a piece, and if we even get half that business,
A lot of jobs.
it's a lot of high-paying jobs. Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
So, Congressman, how did you feel during the Biden administration, during the immigration crisis? How was that representing us here? How did that, give us your opinion,
Yeah.
your point of view while all that was happening? 'Cause-
Well, I was very critical when we saw these surges on the border, and I had a bill that I've been pushing in both Democratic and Republican administrations called the Safe Zone Act. And what my Safe Zone Act bill does, it creates infrastructure in Guatemala. At the time, I was saying Panama. Nowadays, it could be El Salvador with the way things are looking up in El Salvador. And under my bill, anybody who is coming north to our southern borders from south of Mexico must show up to these safe zones that we would be working in conjunction with our host country to process asylum claims. I see them even processing maybe a robust guest worker program in the future, and holding migration down further away from our border. which did two things. It takes the pressure off our southern border and it eliminates cartels from the equation, because cartels have made billions of dollars of trafficking people to our border. But to make a long story short, I can show you text messages on my phone that to the White House, they go back 4 years, tell them if you don't fix this border, you're going to lose your reelection. And they actually wrote stories about it after it actually happened. But I was very critical the whole time. And I'm not anti-immigration at all. I think we need immigrants, but we need to find an orderly way for them to apply.
Legal immigration.
Legal immigration. Right now we have 6 million open jobs in this country that we can't fill. And we can't fill it because our population is not growing that fast. And the only way for us to grow our economy is we need labor.
Yes.
And we're not producing it ourselves. And there's probably 5 segments in the economy where Americans don't work. Agriculture being one, construction being another, the hospitality. But
That's legal immigration. We do need that.
we need legal immigration. Right now, all these industries are the labor in those industries are mostly undocumented.
Right. But what were your thoughts about the illegal immigration?
I was against people showing up undocumented and trying to cross into our border the way they did and abusing the asylum system, because at the end of the day, everybody shows up claiming asylum. 80% of the people who showed up to our southern border claiming asylum never ever qualified for asylum. So I felt that and I still feel when they use those asylum laws, that they're abusing the asylum laws, because they show up and they tell the Border Patrol, they give you a laundry list of things that they're being exploited, they're being either living in a gang-ridden society, or maybe their sexual orientation or religion or something that qualifies you for asylum.
You have to meet the criteria.
Yeah, but it's very easy to meet that credible fear standard because it's a very low standard. And then once we let them in, it takes years for them to get to court. And there was an asylum officer who goes to that first question, the initial interview, and they're able to eliminate about 15%, maybe 20%, depending on the interview. Well, we didn't even have enough asylum officers. So they were just getting in, they were getting a court date. And in places, it takes 3 to 4 to 5 years before you finally get your hearing.
Right.
An immigration judge can only listen to 1,000 cases a year, one immigration court. So we have 160 of those more or less around the country. So that if they're working in full force, they can hear 160,000 claims in 1 year.
How many do we have?
We have millions, right? So just to get through 1 million would take 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah, it's
7 years. It's completely unreasonable. I mean, we would have to create an army of judges and an army of infrastructure and an army of all kinds of things that we haven't done.
Yeah.
We haven't done it. So it's a complex issue. What I believe now, if you've committed any kind of crime, you got to go. I believe that right now. I have zero problem, and I don't think anybody should get deporting anybody who comes in the country and commits crimes. To alleviate labor, I believe, and we don't have anything in Congress, even a proposal for this, because the divide is so great.
Right.
But if we can get a process, if you have an employee that's been with you for 5 years or longer, and you can vouch for, and you can say, this guy's followed the rules, he's a good person, he's a family person, he does everything right, he's been a little soldier, I'd be willing to vouch for him. So there's no problem for the employer, and the employer knows who it is, who he's hiring. There should be a way to give them legal status, not permanent, obviously, temporary legal status. And you keep monitoring that person. And if they're good workers and they start paying their taxes and Social Security, just kind of like the Bracero program.
Exactly.
And try to bring people out of the shadows. Because I think deporting 10 million people or 15 million people is also almost impossible, right? It sounds depending.
They're trying.
Yeah, they're trying. But
So what's your stance on that right now? Everything that's going on there.
well, if they're criminals, I have no problem, right? Getting rid of criminals, people who've taken advantage of the asylum claims and stuff. There's a lot of people that got to go, right? I don't have a qualm with getting rid of folks who've got to go. But I'm talking about good people that have been here 10 years, that have American kids, that are married to an American husband or American wife, that are working for legitimate American businesses and are helping them work and prosper. And when we already have a labor shortage, I think we should find solutions instead of creating the problem and aggravating the situation. We should say, okay, Mr. Farmer, if you have these 10 workers that have been with you for 5 or 8 years and they've been showing up to your farm on time and getting paid and living in the shadows, but have never had any trouble and are just law-abiding citizens, You sign that you vouch for them, and we give them a temporary status to stay here and work while we continue to monitor and process them and try to find a way for them to be here. And the reason I'm so for guest worker programs, if people in Mexico and Latin America, and mostly they're coming from other countries now, want to come on a temporary status to work, and you get the head of the household, usually the father, right, the husband, they come and they work 6 or 9 or 12 months, and they go home for 1 or 2, and then they come back and do it again. And they're taking money home, and they're sending money home, all legal and all above the board and all transparent. You know who they are. They're preventing others from travel to coming north. Because right now what's happening is they're bringing the entire family, and you're seeing women and children and pregnant women and unaccompanied minors, and it's just a mess. It's been a mess. Right now it's kind of been under control for the last few months, but it's been a mess for
decades,
for almost the last 10 years since I started when I got to Congress, it was already a mess, and I think it was a mess before that. So yeah, decades. I guess you could say decades.
Decades, yeah, because different presidents have tried to resolve the problem.
Different policies, right?
Different policies. The Bracero program decades ago, right? Ronald Reagan, I think he had his own amnesty, kind of, like the Bracero program.
What he did is kind of like what I'm kind of proposing.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, because they're already here. He said, okay, look, how are you going to deport millions of people? How do we weed out the bad ones and keep the good ones, and create a system where they can go and apply? And I think back then, I think employers, if you have an employee that's been with you for years, whether he's a ranch hand or he's working in agriculture, or he works in your small hotel, or in the whatever industry it is, you know who the good ones and the bad ones are, right? And you're not going to go sign your name on a document saying I'll vouch for this one if you don't have a solid feeling about them. And I think if you talk to people in the construction industry, in the automotive industry, in all the different industries, there's people that they would be willing to vouch for. I just talked to a group of farmers in Washington. They were all worried about the deportations. These were big Trump supporters, by the way.
Yeah.
But they're really worried about losing their labor. He said, some of these people are like family to us. And right now we're really worried about them.
Well, I completely understand the shortage of labor. I'm in business. I have other friends. They're in construction as well. And so if there's a lot of labor that's here illegally, and they, let's talk about the white elephant in the room. They hire them because, there's a lot of people that don't want to work, Congressman. The work ethic sucks.
For the Americans have gotten soft. I said that earlier. Somebody got after me.
It's unfortunate. And that's why I see AI taking over, robots taking over. You see it everywhere in gas stations where you don't need anybody. You just pay at the pump, right? The new grocery stores, you're charging yourself out. It's, I think, evolving to that because I think we need to replace people because of the work ethic.
Right.
Nobody calling in, getting sick. They feel, they didn't feel like going to work. And all this. It's unfortunate.
There's industries, though, that have been proven unsurvivable without humans, and agriculture is one of them. And there was a farmer here. This was a couple of terms ago, I think during COVID. He was advertising at $15 an hour.
Wow.
He said, I had no takers. Americans, I don't care what color they are, will not do that work. And the hardest work in this country is still done by immigrant labor.
Yes.
And some are here legally and some are not. But we really need to try to figure out a solution.
Yes. So, it's a big problem. So I understand we have to negotiate and find that fine line between. I believe in legal immigration, not illegal immigration.
Right.
But I also recognize the shortage, right, of we need to have a process, a protocol, a proper one to do it the right way. The way it was being done, the last administration was done incorrectly, I feel.
Let me tell you, I'm going to tell you, I was talking to this corporate 500 businessman that's in the construction business, and, sky rises and stuff. And he told me, and very interesting, I'd never heard it say it this way. He said, American immigration policy is illegal immigration. And I was like, well, shoot, I hadn't thought of it that way. He says, think about it. All our labor, most of our labor that does some of the hardest work in this country are illegal. They're undocumented. And we know they're illegal, and they know they're illegal, but yet they show up with their fake ID and their fake social security number. And we know it's fake, but we take it anyway because we need the labor.
Right.
So they take, and it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell. And we've conserved, in order to not fix the problem, we've just conserved this illegal system and we kind of all look the other way and act like it's
Right.
not happening. And for years, we hadn't really deported people, and employers don't get really punished for the most part. It's very rare for an employer to get punished unless they get caught harboring or transporting or something,
Right. Something going
extraordinary.
illegal.
Yeah.
I want to change before we run out of time, Congressman. I want to change our paradigm. Well, not a paradigm, but I have some questions. I want to back up a little bit.
All right.
I've always wondered about you. Is where are you originally from? How did you get started in politics? Where's home for you?
Yeah.
Real home.
Well, I was born in Corpus Christi, about
Okay.
2 hours north up the coast here. And I left Corpus when I was in my 20s and went to law school. And after law school, I moved to the Valley. My friends in law school were from the Valley, and I came down here
Really?
kind of visiting, and it was a very welcoming, beautiful place. And here we are 30 something years later. But Corpus isn't that far. So Corpus is where I started, where I went to school, and my basic schools. Went to community college, and I went to college on a naval air station there, and that's where I got my bachelor's.
Okay.
And when I was in law school, I spent a summer in Congress with Congressman Salomon Ortiz. I don't know if
Wow,
folks
yes.
remember him.
Yes, of
Salomon
course.
Ortiz.
Yeah.
And he was there for about 28 years. And I spent a summer there. It was fascinating to me. Congress was fascinating to me. But after that, I started practicing law and went on beyond about life. And I thought, my chances of going to Congress are about zilch, right?
Right.
And especially in my district when I first ran. My predecessor was Congressman Hinojosa, who
I
had been
remember
there
that.
20 years.
I remember that.
And before that, it was Congressman Kika de la Garza that was there for 36 years.
Yeah.
So in the last 56 years before I got to Congress, there had only been 2 members of Congress. So I thought, well, the chances of me getting to Congress are pretty slim, right?
Yeah.
And plus I hadn't done anything I hadn't run for city council or state rep or anything like that to try to line myself up. And, I was just a busy lawyer, very busy lawyer. And I'll never forget when, but it was kind of a dream of mine. I thought if I ever wasn't going to do something and get involved in Congress and in politics, I would do it in Congress, because I think you can really make an impact on a national and global level and have a voice for our people in a very strong way that impact. Right now, the RGV is on the map. The whole country
Yeah.
has come to visit us at some point or another.
So have you captured the concept? Because I know you're very busy. I don't know how much social media you watch. The concept or the idea, have you caught on where they call this the 956?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
When it's the 956, like sometimes it has a more positive, vibe to it than other. But once you say the 956, everybody kind of,
Pays attention, right?
pays attention.
That wasn't the case years ago.
It is, right? But
I brought over 150 members of Congress down to the Rio Grande Valley, both the Democrats and Republicans, and including the president and secretaries and people. And I can tell you that people who show up for the first time, they're always so pleasantly surprised, right? This is not what they expected. It's not what they had heard. And
stereotypes, right?
yeah, the
The
typical
negative
stereotypes.
stereotypes. Yeah.
And I'm always proud to say my district is safer than where you come from. As you know, McAllen is one of the safest cities in the country.
Mhm.
Brownsville also has a very safe record, and communities along the border are generally much safer than most places around the United States. El Paso used to be the #1 safest city in America before that shooting at
Yeah.
Walmart.
That was
throughout the-
unfortunate.
Yes, but it was the #1 safest city in the country.
Right.
And I think McAllen is #7, and
Right.
and Brownsville's up there, and all this area around the Rio Grande Valley is generally a very safe. My entire district is safe. You go Kingsville,
Right. That's what I was noticing. How does it feel, Congressman, to be representing the SpaceX
oh, it's
area?
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And we're changing the world, and we're hopefully going to Mars, right?
So
And-
what's your view of that? How do you propose to help SpaceX, to any future projects, anything we're not aware of that you would like to share with us?
Well, I think they have a liftoff tomorrow. That's going to be the largest they've ever done, and there's a lot going on there. And they've been good partners. We just ask everybody to be responsible, right, and be good community people. And so far, we've had a great relationship with them. And we're doing it the same with LNG and new industry that we're trying to bring. Hopefully, those nuclear vessels that we bring
Right.
to our port. But I think it's transformational what's happening
It is.
in this region, and it's worldwide. I mean, you have presidents and prime ministers and world leaders coming to this place, and I've brought ambassadors, 150 members of Congress, tens of senators, uh, to South Texas, and they've really gotten a different view. I could tell you, everyone that leaves is in awe by the place, and most people want to come back, and which is really cool. So I have a lot of that I host for the second and third time.
Who's been the most popular person that you brought down from Congress or anybody
Well,
that you feel, wow, I brought this person down?
yeah. Well, I have to say, when I flew down in Air Force One with President Biden, that had to
Okay.
be the top of the top, right? I was pinching myself along the way
All right.
over
Okay.
here, and got to take him to the border, and he got to see the conditions in the Rio Grande Valley. And we actually were able to get the permit to a new bridge, a new presidential permit for a new bridge on the border.
Okay. What time
Yeah,
is that going to
It's going to be in Brownsville,
Okay.
and that happened on that trip. We were also we also got $68 million to help deepen the port on that trip, and I was able to sell a few projects while we were on the plane.
Good.
And when he came down here, he was fascinated. We got to go down to the border and spent the day kind of taking a look. It's a beautiful district. It's where the border meets the coast, and great fishing, nice coastal area. We have a lot of trade. I have a naval air station where I went to college in
Right.
Kingsville, up in the northern part of my district. So I spent some time on that naval air station and some time in Corpus Christi on that naval air station when I finished my degree. And today I get to represent it, and it's a lot of great people, a lot of good, hardworking people, and it's the future of our country.
Oh, it sure is, Congressman. Do you ever work in conjunction with our neighboring Congress person?
I do. We actually
Do you meet? Do you call each other? What's the protocol for that?
Yeah, and our staffs meet a lot, and we meet in Congress whenever there's issues. We try to vote on things that are
Affect
important
both
to
of you.
everybody, right?
Yeah.
I think agriculture, trade, certainly the water issue. There's a lot of things that you have to look beyond party lines, right? Even if you ideologically don't agree with each other 100% on things.
Right. There's a
Uh,
lot of that.
yeah, we at the end of the day, I always tell people, before I vote D or R, I vote for South Texas and for the things that are important to us.
Yes.
And that has meant butting my own party on many issues along the way.
Right. So, would you like to take this opportunity, because I know the past couple of days, where they found where Biden they're making all these allegations, the auto pen signatures, and all that. What's your stance, Congressman, on that? The conditions, as you mentioned, President Biden. Do you feel perhaps you saw where he was declining back then?
Yeah.
And because I have a lot of interested people that are going to be watching the podcast.
Yeah.
And take this moment to explain what your thoughts are on that.
So I flew with him last year to my district, and I'd met with him, many times in 2024. But we were on Air Force One all day that day, and we had a very critical conversation on a lot of things. He was, I think, 83 years old and was a little frail, but
Yeah.
he was on time on every issue that we talked about. We talked about our speeches. We made changes. He wanted to know about mine. I kind of told him, I said, I don't have a written speech, but this is basically what I'm going to tell my people. And we kind of critiqued each other along the way. So I didn't see any dementia in him, but this is something that I do believe was possible. And you've dealt with a lot of elderly people. He wakes up at 6 a.m, right?
Mm-hmm.
And has breakfast and gets to work probably by 7:30 every morning. And I think that by 9 p.m. of a long, grueling day, when you're 83 years old and you're the leader of the free world, he was ready to go to bed.
Yeah.
And if you're talking to a 45-year-old at 9 p.m., he's still rocking and rolling along like every day, right? And
Right.
I know my days start early and end late, but I don't think for most 83-year-olds,
That would be extremely challenging.
that is quite a challenge. Even
I get that.
right, even like right now, at 78, we have our president. He's pretty strong, but give him 4 more years, and I think we're going to see a natural decline, especially in a job that's been that intense for that long.
But do you see the possibility of those allegations that they're raising, that they're he might have not signed a lot of those executive orders, might have done by somebody else in his circle or somebody
Well,
else.
that's
What
that
are your
would
feelings?
that would be quite normal. Once you agree, if you agree to the executive order and it's done electronically or it's done by your assistant, that's still an approved signature of a document. So I can assure you many executive orders from many presidents weren't signed by the president himself, but was the language in that and within the four corners of that document approved by him. That should be the concern. And I believe they were. He didn't sign that many executive orders towards the end, so I don't know. I know he signed some pardons, some I agreed with, some I didn't.
Yes.
His mental acuity, though, I can say was pretty sharp every time that I dealt with him.
Right.
But I would notice that late at night, I could tell you from like the last Christmas party that I was with him, and it was late at night, and that was a long, hard day. And I could tell that he was just like ready to get out of there. He was like, okay, I'm done.
Right.
But the same under President Trump. Now, what I did notice that President Trump takes breaks in between photos and groups and stuff. And I think that's smart, right? You break up your
Right.
time. But yeah, it's a hard job. It's easy to ridicule and criticize. But I still think that he did a lot of good work during the time he was there. What I would have done differently is I would have fired a lot of the staff he had. I think he had staff in that White House that was pretty undeserving and that didn't give him the best advice. And I could tell you because on the border, September of 2023, I spoke to him. And that's when I told him directly, if you don't fix that southern border, you're going to lose your reelection.
And he did.
And right then, I'll never forget it. He turned to his staff and says, we need to get together with him. And, but they didn't want to hear what I had to say. The staff didn't, right? The staff, I believe.
Expand on that. Maybe I don't think a lot of people know.
Yeah, the staff.
They need to know that.
Yeah, I believe
They didn't want to listen to.
They didn't want to hear. I mean, you had these really progressive people that just thought, oh, this guy's this anti-democrat, anti-immigrant Latino from the border. It's like, no, guys. I'm telling you, there's disorder on the border, and we need to pay attention and try to fix it. And this shouldn't be a Democratic or Republican problem. This is an American problem that requires bipartisan solutions. And we had some bipartisan solutions. But anyway, at the moment, they kind of brushed me off after that September meeting. And then I think it was February or March of the following year when they called me and said, hey, the president wants to fly down with you on Air Force One to your district to talk about the border. And I said, well, let's do it. But, we're 3 years late, but let's go.
Yeah.
And we did. And I said, we'll do what we can. But I hate that we're showing up on the last year on an election year. We should have been doing things along the way.
Right.
And that I was critical to the president directly. I was critical to his staff over and over, to the Secretary of Homeland Security, who I had a great relationship with, and many other people in the cabinet. But I never let up that we had a problem on the border. And I believe that that policy came from within the top staff in the administration.
Right. He was misaligned.
I believe he was misguided, and I think he took bad advice. And
Bad counsel.
and that also could be, and that if you want to attribute age, I say, okay, let's attribute that to age, 83 years old, because if you're in your 50s, you might tell your staff, I don't agree with you, and I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to push back on you, right?
What if President Trump comes down here? What's your professional stance on that? Would you cross party lines to meet with him?
Yeah,
to represent our interest here in your district?
So I've met with Trump many times, actually.
Okay.
I have.
Can you expand on that? I don't think a lot of people know.
Yeah.
Congressman, tell us about that.
So let me tell you, my first election to Congress, which was when I came to Congress, was in 2017, along with President Trump for the first time.
Wow.
May of 2017, I was.
We'll find those pictures when we.
Yeah,
podcast.
May of 2017. He invited 3 problem solver members of Congress to dinner at the White House, and that was my first term. And I had 10 other meetings after that with him. But what I have to say is almost every meeting, and this was quite annoying back during that time. I think things have changed in that respect. But every meeting we had, the staff that was with us, the meeting prior, had been fired. So we
I remember that.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, because he would get started and somebody would betray him and start
He
going
had
to the
at the
media.
beginning he had Priebus and Cone and Mark Short and those guys
I
are
do
gone.
remember that.
So then he
So
had,
it was hard for him to get some traction.
and then he went through all these different people, and I'll never forget when he got General Kelly. I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be good because we got a military guy and he's going to bring some order to the White House, which they needed.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, we were there on so I supported the Republicans on a term limit bill. I've always been for term limits, as long as they're across the board. And I got invited with some Republicans to celebrate a proposal of term limits at the Oval Office. And General Kelly was sitting in this bench behind our couch in the Oval Office. And it was a rambunctious group, right? People were going pretty crazy in there.
Wow.
And he just didn't have control of the room. He was just sitting there, and I was like, this is the chief of staff. This is not good, right? Usually the chief will rein everybody in and say, hey, guys, let's stay on track. Let's stay on topic. Everybody sit down, quiet down. Yeah, he didn't do that. And I thought, okay, this isn't good. And sure enough, a little later after that, he was fired too. But I'll never forget a funny part. We were trying to get Trump to tweet about our bill, the term limit bill. And by this point, I had met with the president many times, more than all my Republican friends that were there. These were like freshmen and second term members of Congress, some of them maybe third term. And they were getting him to put this language into his Twitter account to tweet it out on this term limit bill, drain the swamp and the whole stuff, right? And I just knew he wasn't going to do it. I was like, he is bullshitting. He's not going to do this. And so that night we did a press conference in front of the White House, and we went to vote. We had votes that night. And I'm telling my Republican friends that he's not going to send that out. They're like, oh, he is. He's going to send us. I promise you, he's not going to do it. And he didn't do it. And the next day, every day, I would go across the aisle to go pick on my friends, say, hey, he didn't. He still hasn't tweeted to y'all. He's been bullshitting us. Anyway, they were getting so rowdied up. They finally started calling the White House saying, hey, he never tweeted it because he didn't want to upset some senators about that because he was saying 12 years or 2 terms in the Senate or 6 in the House.
Yeah.
And I think his staff probably told him, Mr. President, I don't think that's a good idea. And so a few weeks later, after these crazy guys kept harassing him, he finally sent a watered down version of the tweet. Yeah. So this is 20 before COVID. So it was like 2019, somewhere around 2019.
Okay.
It was interesting times. It was a very different time from where we're living today.
So, Congressman, some of the closing questions that I have for you is, what should we know about our congressman's future? What are some proposed? You already touched the topic on some of the proposals that you have here, right, for growth. But something else you haven't mentioned, right? Why should we continue to support you? What are you bringing to changes for us, right? And how are you working with other districts, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, what I've done is I've brought almost $8 billion of infrastructure funding to our schools, to the infrastructure. We see everything from Padre Island to McAllen, resources to take care of our seniors or veterans. I'm going to continue bringing resources because, in my opinion, if we don't have the resources, we can't build the community we want and we need.
Right.
And so that's always been a number one priority. We want to make sure people have the resources, have good schools, they can grow it healthy, they've got healthcare they need, they've got nutrition that they need to survive and go and do well. And then they have the educational opportunities that they deserve when they turn 18, whether it's going to college or community college or technical school or the military, but that we have the resources to support our youth. And then when they finish, that we have jobs waiting for them to come home. And that's what when we talk about jobs, that's when I'm focused in on terminals, LNG terminals at the port.
You're bringing a lot of bringing in jobs,
but not only jobs, but good paying jobs.
Right.
Keep growing trade. Trade has made our area blossom, and we need to make sure that trade continues to grow, but that it doesn't just pass through, that it doesn't just go to a warehouse and through, that we're part of the manufacturing process, that we're part of the investing process, that we're part of the real estate investments in these projects. When the LNG plants are being built, I want to make sure that it's local contractors, local builders, local welders, local engineers, local everything.
That's a lot.
To the extent that we can. They've promised me 70%, and I think they're going to fulfill it. 70% local, and that helps not only the working people, but small business and middle-sized businesses. And it helps some of them grow, right, to the next level. Because now we'll have companies that are bringing billions of dollars and spending billions of dollars in our region. And obviously continue to grow our schools, our universities, our medical school, and all that have the entire infrastructure, the educational infrastructure, the business infrastructure, the trade infrastructure, healthcare, and assure that we've built an entire community where people can learn and grow healthy and thrive and want to come back and want to stay here.
Yes. Well, what would be your closing statement? How you feel you want to relate to your population here, to your voters? Because remember, here they recognize I speak to entertainers, I speak to comedians. We've podcasted to a broad spectrum of people that vote for you. And there's a new generation. We're hitting a lot of social media, and they relate to it as a 956. Is there any thoughts, closing statements? You know, take my platform here and
I want to make sure that I keep delivering the green to our region.
Okay.
And with that comes education, healthcare, prosperity, and future growth for our region. And always, be with my gente here in South Texas.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for coming to the ranch.
Thank you.
You're always welcome here.
Thank you.
Congressman.
It's a real pleasure.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you for having
Yes.
me.
Thank you. Okay.